Welcome to the Strategic Marketer Podcast, where we talk about strategies, tactics, and practical steps to help you become a more strategic marketer. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I'm speaking with Mary Keough. At the time of the recording, Mary was a marketing specialist at Spraying Systems, and in our conversation, we're talking about some of the initiatives that she was working on while she was there. Since the interview, she's taken a role as a strategist at Gorilla 76. Gorilla 76 is a marketing agency that focuses on manufacturing companies and companies in the industrial industry. In our conversation, Mary and I discuss whether marketing should be driven by the sales department in some of these small to mid-sized businesses, especially in the more trades or manufacturing industries, and how to start bringing more of a digital marketing strategy and get digital marketing initiatives approved at companies that have traditionally been very sales heavy. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Mary, should marketing strategy and daily tasks be driven by the sales department?
That's an excellent question. Marketing strategy, I don't think should be necessarily driven by any specific department. I think it should be a few different departments working together, depending on what kind of company you're in. I'm an industrial company, so we have market segment teams, and then we have sales, and then we have marketing. So I think a really great marketing strategy kind of blends all three together. As far as daily tasks, probably not driven by sales, maybe more driven by individual team leaders, what your kind of initiatives are for the quarter, month, week. I have specific goals that I have to hit based on quarter, month, week. So my daily tasks are kind of written out very specifically. I mean, I have a to-do list right now of like 5 to 10 things. And as I cross them off, more get added.
Absolutely. So what are some of the downsides of, because I mean, I'm in a similar space, marketing to engineers or industrial companies. And in these companies, it tends to be very sales driven, sales team driven.
Yeah.
So I feel like it is pretty common in a space like ours where there's a lot of technical things where the sale can be very technical. You need a sales team. You need a good sales team that knows the products and knows how to explain them. But then that can kind of bleed down into marketing being driven by the sales team. And so what are some of the downsides of a sales-driven marketing team?
So the downsides I see are we're driven by reactive rather than proactive forces. So when things need to be hit, certain numbers need to be hit, booked orders, shipped orders, leads, opportunities. Those are the metrics that we rely on. So that's kind of, it's a good and a bad thing, right? So we're always driving business strategy forward. We're always like focused on profits and focused on revenue, but we're not necessarily focused on the back end or the proactive forces that can really drive those to what I would consider like what could be a higher profit margin, what could be higher revenue. So a lot of the numbers that I wouldn't say I am really focused on because I'm not really tied to any numbers specifically, but our sales team is. So when they're kind of focused on a really specific metric, then it's difficult for marketing to come in and be like, hey, you should care about this instead.
Right. I know that you're going to get in trouble if you don't hit your numbers and get a talking to or whatever. But don't worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some examples of things that you've seen where marketing could maybe be focusing on something different, but gets dragged down into tasks that maybe help fill these immediate needs, like you're talking about, help you meet the immediate pipeline goals, but might be hindering you in the long run?
Yeah. So I think, you and I are already seeing a lot of brand awareness, really positive feedback from an intent standpoint, driven from like podcasts and webinars. So heavy content, focused on educating people. That's what's really driving, I think, revenue in the long term. And that's what's going to be a proactive activity. From our organization standpoint, we're just not focused on that at all. I really had to push to get a webinar program implemented. we finally did, which is great. But then we're also tasked with really specific metrics, like how many attendees did you get? Were these attendees converted into opportunities? So it's a good thing, but unfortunately then we're bogged down by a lot of product development. So our market development teams are constantly creating new products which need to be sold, right? That's awesome, but they're always looking then for very product specific marketing content. So bulletins, email marketing that's, hey, look at this new product for this specific ideal customer profile. So that kind of gets dragged down a little bit. And then those long-term proactive content marketing strategies kind of get pushed to the back burner a little bit because we are so focused on sales, right?
Yeah. And as you're talking about that, the gears that are turning in my head are, I've always heard in the marketing world, oh, brand awareness is so important, brand. And then,
for sure,
people are looking at companies like P&G or, these massive consumer companies. And then I've met and talked with a lot of people from those companies or the agencies. I mean, P&G's here in Cincinnati. So I've talked to a lot of people that work at agencies that support P&G or, similar companies. And people become so focused on the brand and the feel of the brand and the look and the colors. Yes. And to me, that gets to be so kind of ethereal and out there that, how do you tie any of that to know whether what you're doing is working or not?
Yes.
But it feels like in the industrial space, like we're talking about, it's almost the opposite where everything gets tied to numbers, which you need.
Yes.
I mean, if you don't have sales, you don't have a company. So
yes, exactly.
obviously you need that.
Plus engineers like numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to get people to buy into. And yeah, I mean, and I don't know if this is true in your company, but it seems like in a lot of industrial companies or engineering companies that a lot of people are hired from within into different roles. So you might have people on your sales team that were engineers or people on your marketing team that were engineers. And so understanding how they operate and what they need to make decisions is important. But it seems like there is an opportunity to maybe pull those things together and kind of like you're touching on with the podcasts and webinars and things like that. Yeah. That is brand awareness. I mean, that really truly is building your brand.
Yes.
And I don't want to be reading into what you're saying, but what it sounds like from my perspective is you have a way to be able to drive long-term brand awareness for your product to create demand for what you do.
Yeah, that's
versus
exactly
just having people who want what you have right now. So maybe this person has no idea that you have a product that they could use.
Sure.
So your sales team could reach out to that person all day long and they're never going to move. Or somebody who already has a vendor that they work with that they love, and your salesperson could call on them all day and they're never going to get them to switch.
Yes.
But through these different demand generation activities, brand building activities, whether that would be content marketing, podcasting, webinars, you're able to really build a demand for that and maybe get somebody to switch from somebody that they've trusted forever over to you.
Definitely. Yep. And I think that goes into a lot of, I mean, you're touching on it a little bit with creating demand, is creating that separate category, right? So maybe you're not displacing them through comparison, like, hey, my product is better than your product because of these features and benefits. But you're almost creating a whole separate category in which you're the leader in that category. So for us, a good example might be like maintenance. There's not a lot of people who talk about how to maintain our equipment, which is pretty interesting. So we can kind of create this whole category in maintenance of spray equipment and then build demand around that. And then if you have someone who's a competitor in there, you can displace them just based on like, oh, hey, I know how to maintain this piece of equipment now. I can make my system last longer. I can build better replacement cycles, decrease maintenance downtime. Like those are huge things for our customers. So maybe even just creating, that separate category that's customer focused, and that displaces them rather than a simple, hey, compare and contrast.
Right. Yeah. And if you're comparing, especially, I don't want to say that industrial companies are always commodities because they're certainly not, but there's for most companies in the industrial space, there's competitors that create something that is extremely similar.
Exactly.
And from the outside looking in, sure, the engineers can argue all day about the specific features and benefits, but to most people, a fastener is a fastener or a bearing is a bearing. And there's
Right.
certainly, that's any engineer that's listening to this is
they're going to hate us.
be hating me. But, even for engineers, if they're looking at it and they're not an expert in bearings as much as an engineer that creates bearings, they might not know
Right.
enough about it with those features and benefits. So then figuring out those differentiators that aren't just the specific features and benefits is really important. That's a huge factor in getting people to become loyal to your company.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Totally agree.
This week's episode of The Strategic Marketer is brought to you by the Brand Compass course. If you're looking to take your marketing services side hustle to the next level, the Brand Compass course is for you. In the course, you're going to learn how to identify your ideal customers and narrow down to serve a niche market. Then you're going to learn how to productize your offering so that it's easier for customers to understand exactly what you do for them. And then you're going to put all of this information into a one-page messaging guide. That way you can use your customer's language to speak exactly to their pain points and problems every single time. Check out the show notes for a link to the course. Yeah, and actually that's kind of interesting too, because I've been learning a lot about different engineering initiatives that are happening at companies.
Yeah.
And Industry 4.0 is a huge one. And not to go too far into the weeds on that because this is about marketing and engineering. But there's all of these technologies that are being developed for machine learning and different AI technology and all of these different pretty advanced technologies, but it's all driven by data.
Yes.
And so engineers have to have data from companies about the parts that they put on their machine in order to automate certain things down the road or to create machine learning algorithms or anything like that. They need data. Yes. And so, if we put our marketing hat back on, just like you said, the maintenance is a way to differentiate. Data is another way to differentiate. If you are able to give engineers that data they need to achieve this goal they're trying to achieve on that their company has a company-wide initiative on, they're way more likely to come to you if you're giving that to them and they don't have to figure it out on their own or do a lot of work to figure that out. And so anything you can do to figure out even non-monetary benefits, the things that you don't necessarily even have to charge for,
right,
but that bring more value to your product, it can really differentiate you and help you to create that loyalty from customers.
Yeah. So now you're not the widget that does XYZ. You're the Industry 4.0 widget that does XYZ, which is just creating a whole new category for yourself and for your product, right?
Exactly. And your product itself might be even exactly the same. But if you have data or you have maintenance or you have these other things that people get with the package, you could charge more, potentially. It depends on the product, but you could potentially charge more, and in some cases significantly more. Depending on how good you are at figuring out something that people really want. Okay, so as you've driven towards a more digital marketing strategy and you've been working on that in your own company, what are some of the results you've seen or benefits from kind of taking that more digital marketing focus?
Yeah, so I would say our digital marketing strategy started really small. So I wasn't always I'm in the industrial corporate side now as a marketer. I was in a really small department in R&D, and we were tasked in the pandemic with releasing a new product line. And my suggestion was, hey, we got to go digital. I mean, our company was really not that digital before. Of course, I think most industrial marketers can empathize with me on that. So we had kind of a lack of content. So my big push was webinars because it's really easy. Blogs and articles are awesome. White papers can be broken up into pieces, reposted on social. They're great, but they're time consuming, especially from my end. So I was the only marketer for this team. I didn't have anyone under me. I didn't have anyone in front of me. It was just the head of that team, me, and then all the research engineers, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I had to build it all myself. So I knew I couldn't do it from a technical side, writing blogs, writing articles, writing white papers. I would need some kind of engineer input. And at that point, I was like, well, might as well just do a webinar, right? So we can take one of these big categories, record me talking with a research engineer with a customer base present who can ask questions that we might never have even thought of. So it was just kind of like, it was an easy win, right? It was kind of a low hanging fruit. So we started with a webinar program. It went great. We started with like 20 attendees and then grew it organically to an average of 80 attendees. And then our highest one was 120, which was great. We were really, really thrilled with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then our big strategy was getting all up on YouTube, sending the recording. It's an easy thing to do. Breaking it up then into pieces and then redistributing it. We didn't really have a lot of budget for paid social. I would have loved to do an experiment with that. We did some ads to increase attendance. It wasn't like, super, it was successful. It was a really good learning experience, but we didn't have a ton of budget even for that. So distributing anything on paid social was probably a no. But doing it on organic YouTube, I mean, it was fantastic. We saw, 100 people watch this hour-long webinar, but then like 300 people watch this 5-minute clip, which was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And just to get those initiatives rolling and to start seeing the value of that is really exciting.
Yeah. And organic, which I was pretty thrilled with. Most of the stuff I've been reading and trying to implement has all been, hey, you got to push it out through paid if you want to get in front of the right people. So to see it organically was awesome.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And that is really a huge area of opportunity for more niche products. So if you are in the industrial space, especially, but any space where, if you're trying to rank for digital marketing, you're going to have a really, really hard time.
Yeah.
That is very, very competitive. But if you're trying to rank for something in the spraying systems world, in any of the products that you guys sell, it's going to be way easier through blogs or YouTube or anything, just because there's not nearly as much content about it out there.
Exactly. Yeah. I think industrial marketers should be excited to be where they're at. You kind of get to be on the ground floor of building a content strategy in a place where no one's really thinking about content strategy.
Yeah. And I think another benefit is when you're in an organization that has traditionally been very sales driven, you're typically going to have very knowledgeable sales people.
Yes.
And that is a huge benefit as a marketer.
Definitely.
Kind of to your point, if you're going in and saying, hey, you need to change your metrics and the way that you think right off the bat, that's going to be pretty tough. But if you're curious and you go in and you ask good questions, they're going to know the product because they're not relying on marketing to bring everything into them. They've had to build relationships with customers and really understand customer pain points and, the market and what's going on, and their wealth of knowledge kind of in between them and the engineer. And engineers are also really valuable to talk to and get information, but the salespeople are one step closer to what we do in developing customer language and doing everything like that. So if you are trying to get an initiative like that off the ground, it's a lot easier.
Oh my gosh.
Sales team in place.
I completely agree. Our sales team is fantastic. I could never have done some of the initiatives I wanted to do in that R&D department without the backing of some of our sales reps. So they kind of add clout to any marketing initiatives that you want to see started too. If you say something like, hey, John Smith, the sales rep who is super successful in this territory, wants to co-host this webinar with me, it's automatically, oh, okay, yeah, we should put some dollars behind that. We should put some excitement behind that, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. Strategic Marketer is brought to you in part by Thrive Themes. Thrive Themes is a killer visual WordPress editor. They've also recently launched editable themes so that you can edit every element of your WordPress theme. You can create amazing landing pages that are beautiful and conversion focused. They've built all of their products around helping you convert more leads into customers. You can find out more about Thrive Themes by clicking the link in the show notes. So yeah, as you were driving from, more of that sales driven marketing where you're kind of just playing catch up and creating materials or creating things for the
Yeah,
sales team, which, again, they need the support. We need to
for
be getting
sure.
that stuff to them. But at the same time, it's not necessarily building that demand. So what did you do to work with your leadership to help them to see the value of moving towards a digital marketing strategy? What did you do to get buy-in from leadership?
Yeah, so getting buy-in started probably when I started working for the company. So I think a lot of getting leadership behind you is making sure you did the job you were hired for really well in the beginning,
Mm,
and then also filled some voids. So making sure you're doing some daily tasks, seeing some voids that are in your team, in the greater organization, and then volunteering to fill those voids in
mm,
your free productive time. That's where I got the most excitement behind me, the most leadership clout behind me, I guess you would say.
yeah.
Was just doing my job really well, and then filling some voids.
Yeah. No, that's really excellent advice. Because when you're, I've heard similar things from a lot of the people I've talked to. When you're on a smaller marketing team or not a super heavy marketing driven company, it's not always easy to get the ball rolling. And if you just
Yes.
jump in and try to say, "Hey, we need to switch to all digital marketing and hire 15 more," it's like
Yeah.
that's probably not going to happen. But if you start small and go for those small wins,
Yeah.
and at the same time, to your point, you do what you've been hired for excellently and beyond, then you've kind of
Yes.
gained the credibility with people, and they know you supported them in things that they've been working on and helped them to win, and
Yes.
they're far more likely than to help you win.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to PowerPoint. That was how I built a lot of my reputation in my past job and in my current role. I just went in there and just tore apart all the PowerPoint presentations and made them look better, and, even did like fancy animations, which are, really big,
Ooh.
and embedded some videos. And I mean, it was great. That gave me a lot of good reputation and a lot of opportunities to expand my role and my responsibilities. So shout out to PowerPoint.
Yeah, I love that. Um, no, that's really helpful to be thinking in those terms. And I've worked both with people who I've seen do that and people who haven't. And the people who are really out to serve the people that they're working with create opportunity for themselves and create
Yes.
opportunity to help the organization grow by bringing new ideas and fresh ideas and having more input across different departments, not just marketing. But then you see people who want to just do their thing and stick to their thing, and they end up being, um, mostly only having say over maybe what they do on a daily basis. Maybe seeing
Yeah.
their daily tasks, but not really being part of anything larger than that. And when you're working at a B2B company, for marketing to really be effective, you need messaging that goes across multiple departments and not just
Yes.
what you're sending out an email or what's on your website. But the more that it connects with messaging in the sales team, marketing, and even fulfillment,
Yep.
implementation, what depending on the company, or when somebody gets the product, what's the packaging like? What was their experience like?
Yes.
What was follow up with customer service? Was the same language used in customer service that was used with marketing and sales?
Right.
And there's no way that you can develop cohesive messaging across an organization as a marketing person unless you have one, knowledge of the process and all of those
Yes.
different functions, and two, relationship with people in each of those departments that you've earned influence with and earned the right to
Yes.
be able to make suggestions. And your example of how to do that is excellent, just stepping in and doing
Yeah.
things that aren't necessarily part of your specific job.
Right. I think that's an awesome point. I never really thought about that. It was something I did without really thinking about it, but I think that's another good way for, a more junior level marketing person who wants to be in that upper role. Go out and ask your leader if you can talk to somebody in sales, customer service, corporate marketing, XYZ, whatever else, what other kind of teams or departments your company has. I guarantee a really good leader is not going to say no. So if you just find 30
Absolutely.
minutes to talk to one of those people, I mean, that'll give you so much education about the business and about how, like you said, the sales process works.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would add two things to that. If you have people on your team, purposefully even get them outside of their comfort zone to go
Yeah.
talk to people on your team that aren't in marketing.
Yes.
Make sure that they are getting on some sales calls and listening in so that
Yeah.
they can learn directly from the customer what they're saying and the language that the salespeople use. And if that person is looking to be helpful, they will probably win influence with the salesperson to help them make their language better. And then number two is get on LinkedIn or anywhere you can and find experts in the industry that you're in. Both on
Yes.
the marketing side, but also who are the experts in the field that you're in, and reach
Yeah.
out to them. And in my experience, if you're curious and humble, people
Yep.
will hook you up with so much information. So if you reach out to somebody who's an engineer, if you're in the industrial space, who's in involved in the same area that you're marketing in, just reach out and say, hey, I'm a marketer, I'm new
Yeah.
to the industrial space, and I
Yes.
don't really know what I'm talking about. I'd love to just interview you about these couple things and learn. I've heard that you're an expert in this area and wanted to pick your brain, and
Yeah.
tons of people will be open to that.
Yes. I've done it before. It works. It sounds crazy, but just try it. You feel really awkward at first, but it works. People want to tell you their story.
Yeah, people love to talk about themselves and love
Yeah.
to feel like experts. So to wrap it up here, what are a few practical steps that a marketing person can take that's in a sales-driven company?
Yeah. So the number one I would say is start talking to people in other teams. So what we talked about, especially in sales. So get in with a few of those, maybe not the top sales guys in terms of revenue, but the top sales guys in terms of they get excited about new projects. That's where I found the most success and the most knowledge. Talk to people in the customer service department, talk to people in finance. If you have access to it, I would learn a little bit about the business and how the sales process works. So what do leads to opportunities to sales to customers look like? What's your percentage of returning customers to new customers? How is your profit by market segment? That kind of thing. Even if you have just a really, really general idea of it, you can impress people with a few numbers. And then for sure, talk to customers if you're able to. So I was not able to at first. I kind of ran into some roadblocks there. But even if you do it on your free time, just through like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So like, let's say you really want to talk to people in the steel industry, for example. Just go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, sign up for a free 30-day trial, and start reaching out to people with that exact script you said. Hey, I'm new to the industrial space. I really want to learn more about this. Can you I won't take up more than 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I mean, this is really important and key. And this is something that you're sharing, but I've heard multiple times already interviewing guests, and it's been my experience too. If you want to be a good marketer, you have to be curious.
Yes.
And you have to go ask questions and try to learn as much as you can about marketing, but also about whatever industry you're in. And you have to really dive deep. And the deeper that you dive and the more knowledge that you have about your space, the better you're going to be. And if you really understand customer problems and pain points, you can speak to that. But how could you understand customer pain points and problems if you don't understand the industry at all and what's going on?
Right. Yep. And then write all those things down, those customer interviews, make a summary of it and send it to your boss. And I guarantee he or she will love it.
Love it. No, that is excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary, so much for joining the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having
some
me.
really great advice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to The Strategic Marketer wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could do me a personal favor and hit 5 stars on the rating, you don't have to leave a full review. Just hit 5 stars. It would really help me out. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Strategic Marketer.